What's up everyone? Alex here. As mentioned in my review, the synthesis tutorials in Atelier Ryza can be quite unwieldy and confusing to the point that you're not really quite sure what to look for when you're making items. If you just want a quick way to make things, I encourage you to use the game's auto add materials function so that your adventure won't be impeded. However, if you're ready to get down to the nitty-gritty of synthesis, this video is just for you. I will warn you now that this is a very visual tutorial, so if you were planning on just listening to this, you might miss some key elements here. The goal of synthesis is to create the highest quality items possible with the materials you currently have. The reason for this is that when you make an item with two different qualities, the higher quality item will always have the highest potency. For example, an explosive Unibomb with a higher quality will have a higher damage potency than one that's lower. Likewise, a grass seed with a higher quality will have a higher healing potency. When choosing an item to synthesize, you can actually view more information about the item by selecting it and viewing the table of contents. From there, you'll have a list of any related topics, including the item you're creating. If you select it, you'll be shown all the relevant information, from its category to its core charge cost, and any additional materials you might need. If for some reason this page is practically empty, this means that you'll have to either gather said material or craft the item once to unlock all of the info. From here, you can see the available effects you'll be able to give the item when you're synthesizing. Effects alter the behavior of your item in a variety of different ways. Don't worry though, if you don't remember what these all do, you can always check them while you're in the middle of synthesizing an item. Each recipe requires a starting material, and it's always listed on the top of the display on the right side of the screen. Any materials listed underneath are some of the other materials you'll want to consider if you want to unlock effects or trait slots. More on these later. So let's recap for a sec. The goal of synthesis is to create the highest quality items from the materials we have. Quality affects the potency of the item, whether it's damage, healing, or otherwise. At every step, we can use the table of contents to see every single piece of information we need. And if the pages are empty, we'll probably need to gather the material or craft that item once to unlock its contents. And finally, in order to begin, we need a material belonging to the category on the display on the right. Moving on, for this tutorial, we'll craft an explosive Uni. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see a choose quantity number with orbs above it. The orbs indicate the minimum amount of materials you'll need to begin synthesis. Choose quantity is confusing. This is a counter that counts down how many materials you have left to use before being forced to make the item. In other words, this will limit you from basically unlocking everything in your recipe. We'll begin by looking at the first material loop. This is what you call these shapes in the recipe. When looking at the first material loop, you'll notice that it's got a list of effects below it with a bunch of orbs beside them. The material loop here also happens to be labeled Effect 1. As mentioned earlier, effects alter the behavior of your item in a variety of different ways. The orbs indicate how much elemental potency is required to unlock that effect. In this material loop's case, we need 3 lightning to unlock scatter and an additional 5 lightning to unlock explosive, for a grand total of 8 lightning. One thing Atelier Ryza is unclear about is whether or not you are required to unlock these effects. You actually don't need to. In fact, if you just want to be able to unlock the other adjacent material loops, all you have to do is place a material into the material loop, and it doesn't even matter if the elements match what's being asked. That said, you're already here. Might as well unlock an effect or two, right? When you begin selecting the materials for this material loop, you'll see a bunch of numbers and different colored orbs above each material. The numbers indicate that item's elemental potency, which is actually reflected in the display below. The elements are the different colored orbs above the item. If there's more than one colored orb, that means that material has multiple elements that have the same elemental potency. In order to unlock this material loop's effects, you'll have to match the required elements to the element of the material you want to use. For example, if we want to unlock scatter, we will need to provide materials whose lightning potency adds up to at least 3. That could be 3 materials with 1 lightning potency each, 2 materials with 2 lightning potency each. You get it? But you also want to make sure that the quality is as high as it can be. Remember that quality controls the potency of the item. For that, hit the sub-menu button, select Sort, and select Quality. As you might have guessed, this will sort all the materials from the highest quality to the lowest. You can see the selected material's quality by looking at the display below. That said, let's look at the bottom display. Note that all of the information about the selected material is here, including the quality, the elements it's imbued with along with their elemental potency, and the effects and traits. Traits are another way of affecting the behavior of the item and can be passed on from one to the other. Only 3 traits can be selected for an item. By default, any traits you imbue on your item will be disabled, and this will be indicated in the final product with a lock icon. You'll still be able to pass on these traits, of course. It's just that these items won't be able to use it. However, there's a trait material loop that enables them somewhere in the recipe. You just need to find a way to get to it and unlock each trait slot with, you guessed it, materials with a corresponding elemental potency. Let's recap again here. Material loops describe the many shapes you're seeing in a recipe. In order to start, you'll have to select a material for the first material loop. It can be any material, provided it belongs to the same category as what's being asked. However, if you want to unlock that material loop's effects, you'll have to select items whose elemental potency adds up to what's required for that effect. We also have to make sure to select the highest quality materials here, therefore improving the item's potency. We can easily do this by selecting the sort function to sort by quality when selecting the material. And finally, traits are another kind of effect that can be passed on from item to item. In order for the trait to be enabled for the current item we're making, we have to unlock its trait slots by working our way around the recipe to the trait material loop and fulfilling its elemental potency requirements. Now that we've placed a material in our first material loop, we can now move to the adjacent loops. If we look at the material loops connected to the current one we're in, you'll notice that they're locked and have an element with a quantity. All this means is that if we wish to go to that material loop, the material we need to put in this material loop should match the element and elemental potency required. In the case of the material loop to the left, we will need a total of 3 fire to unlock it. However, you'll also notice that the material loop below requires 1 wind. Remember earlier when I said that some materials can have multiple elements? This is when that can be handy. From here, what kind of effects and traits and other doodads you want to imbue on the item is up to you. Remember that you only need at least 2 materials to begin the synthesis at any time, indicated by the orbs on the bottom, right above Choose Quantity. Now that we've begun synthesis, you'll be selecting 3 traits to pass onto your item. All of these traits came from the materials you selected. Just select at most 3 traits here, confirm that you want to make the item with an OK, and voila! Your new item is made. Congratulations! Now, I realize that everyone learns things differently, so if you have any questions about synthesis in Atelier Ryza, please don't hesitate to post a comment below. I know this is confusing stuff, but if there's anything that I can do to help you out, I will be more than happy to answer your questions there. If you found this tutorial to be helpful, or even if you didn't, please let me know how I can improve in the comments as well. Thanks a lot for watching, and have a great gaming week.